Sunflower and the Forest of Twisted Memories by Alberto Martin Tabora. Chapter 4. What This Place Used to Be. Sunflower brought me to the abandoned building next to where Eric's shop was and the play structure she first brought me to. Everyone around here thinks this used to be some sort of elementary school, Sunflower told me. It's full of empty classrooms and old learning material meant for kids. I looked at the front door. There were no indications of it being locked or boarded up. Sunflower walked up and opened it with no trouble. Eric was one of the first to discover it. He had a friend who found it with him before they settled here. They decided to rent it out to the people here, not as homes, but as recreational spaces. Eric uses some of the old classrooms here to store goods and stock from his store. Andrea uses it for her drawing studio, or whatever she does. I have my own space too. I followed Sunflower down the main hallway right in front of the main entrance. It was a straight walk through the building from the front to a door at the back. There was no light in the building. It was dark and run down. It smelled okay, as I imagined the people here cleaned it up some. However, that didn't stop vines and grass from growing inside the building. There were large holes in the ceiling of the main hallway, covered up with glass domes or panels that were glued or nailed in. Sunflower opened the door in the back and revealed a large space within. Whoa! This room is huge! It's all yours? I said in awe. Yup, she assured me proudly. I managed to buy out the biggest room in the building. Of course, Jonathan wanted it first, but I beat him to it. It cost me 460 mulchings. That number astonished me. She must have worked for months to obtain such a room. It only took me a week, Sunflower proudly stated. The kites don't get broken often, so I had to do other jobs that Zoopank lists around the area. The room looked like it used to be a library. There were shelves full of old books everywhere. At the back of the library was a row of glass panes that jutted out in half a circle from the main wall. There were old tables and chairs laying around, even some vintage computers. It was impressive, but more impressive that it all belonged to Sunflower. How do other people not mess with your room? I asked, realizing how it only took opening the door to get inside the massive space. Well, Eric has systems in place. If something seems wrong, you report it to him, and he uses a special coat of dust that every floor is coated in. It replays what anyone does in this room, or any room. So, I suppose don't get naked or anything. Not that Eric spies on us all. Wow, I could only say, as I walked around in amazement. A pretty chandelier hung from the ceiling. It made me feel a little disappointed knowing the building looked like it would never hold power to light it up again. This place is filled with children's books. Sunflower shuffled through litter on the floor. She didn't care to keep the floor that clean, but I found some good books from other places and started a sizable collection you might like. Sunflower stopped and turned to look at me. Do you like reading? I think so, I shrugged. I'll get you started on my favorites. Sunflower went over to a bookshelf and looked through them. What genres do you like? I asked her. Anything action, adventure, maybe some mystery? Sunflower tilted her head to better read the titles of her books. She picked one up off the shelf. Here's a sci-fi one, Trial and Error. It's about this group of space mechanics and builders who make spaceships for exploration on a distant asteroid. There's more to it than just that, but I wouldn't want to spoil the rest of it. Sunflower happily held the book up to show me the cover. What else you got? I said, not that interested. Sunflower looked back through her selection. Maybe you'd like Tropical Island? That's a basic title, I scoffed. It's not terrible. It's strange, but it's something, Sunflower explained. Okay, I'll perhaps start with that one. I walked up closer to Sunflower as I was still standing in the middle of the room while she was very off to the side. Sunflower handed me the book. We found a comfortable spot by the windows to sit and read. I opened up the book in my hand. There was an illustration of a woman who looked like a tiger. She had a spear in her hand and seemed like she was trekking through a savage forest. Sunflower laid on her belly and opened up a book that she was previously in the middle of beforehand. She smiled as she read. Sunflower looked like a stock image of a happy girl reading a book. The only thing missing was the watermark. Sunflower said nothing. She handed me a book and I suppose expected us to just throw ourselves straight into reading. I went along with it. I didn't feel like reading, but I had nothing else better to do. I've been kinda stuck, just going along with whatever Sunflower wanted to do, or seeing whatever she wanted to show me. It didn't bother me at all. It's just been a confusing time. I still don't know where I'm from, who I am, what my name is, yet I remember several aspects about life itself. It's like whatever happened to my memories, they were specifically filtered. I didn't want any existential dread looming over me at the time, so I decided to bury myself in the new adventure laid out in the pages I held in my hands. Sunflower was right. The story was indeed strange, although I couldn't help but find enjoyment in the moment. Sunflower was happy, but I had the feeling it wasn't because of whatever she was reading. She must have wanted a reading buddy. I felt glad to be able to be her book pal. She looked up at me at one point and caught me glancing over at her. I awkwardly shifted my gaze back to my book and pretended it didn't happen. I wondered if she liked me, in a special way. I wasn't sure how I felt about her. She was just kinda there and helped me through everything so far. Is this some sort of weird Stockholm syndrome? Or could it really be these small feelings within me simply reacting to the gentle care and friendship that I was receiving? I tried to focus back into the book. I got a good 3 chapters into it before I got tired and looked up from the book. I glanced over at Sunflower. She was on her back now, holding the book over her head. I had no idea how she was able to hold her arms up like that for so long. I glanced around and noticed a bunch of wooden objects on a nearby table. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to close my book and get up. I need to stretch my legs for a bit, I told Sunflower. Okay, she said, totally glued to whatever she was reading. I walked around and admired the library. For what seemed to be, what used to be, an elementary school, it was quite impressive. I glanced back at Sunflower, still invested in those pages. I slowly walked around and came up to that table with the wooden crafts I spotted. They were all wooden creations of different objects, animals, and vessels. The most impressive-looking ones were of boats with small fabric sails attached to them. I picked up a wooden train. The wheels on it clanked. This prompted the sudden sound of a book being closed, followed by fast footsteps. "Oh my goodness! I forgot to show you these!" Sunflower happily exclaimed. "Wait, you made these?" I asked in surprise. "Yeah." Sunflower picked up a boat. She fiddled with a sail, trying to get it back into place. "After I built my hut by hand, I needed to explore my craft a little further." "I love these. These are so good," I complimented her. "Thank you." Sunflower smiled at me. She looked so warmed up. I thought she was about to hug me or something. She looked back at her collection and picked up a little horse. "I never got any recognition from anyone else for these. I enjoy them, though. They're so fun to make." "I suppose that's more important than the recognition you would get for making them," I said, admiring the piece I had in my hands. "You think so?" Sunflower looked at me with a sense of wonder in her eyes. I wasn't sure if she was curious as to what I meant or agreed with what I said. "I would go crazy if I spent so much time alone without being able to express myself," I said. "Even if there wasn't an audience for miles. Despite the want for some sort of recognition, I'd be happy being able to even put my skills to work like you do." I can teach you." "You sound like you were an artist." She put down her boat. "What? Woodworking?" I put down the train. "Yeah," Sunflower said excitedly. "And if you make cool stuff, I'll be your audience. I will give you feedback." "I would certainly like to try," I said with a smile, staring at the wooden train I had just set back down on the table. Before Sunflower could even utter her next thought, loud footsteps were heard outside of the library. Sunflower jolted and gasped. "Jonathan," she muttered with fright in her voice. Sunflower took my hand and led me to the front doors of the library. She cautiously stepped out into the hallway and looked around. "It's clear." Sunflower led me down the hall towards the entrance. The footsteps were suddenly heard from a hallway to the left of the front doors to the building. "Shoot! Quickly, back this way!" Sunflower frantically led me back through the main hallway towards the library. I heard a menacing metal clanking accompanying the intimidating footsteps. Sunflower turned right and walked up to a row of glass panels looking out into a small courtyard. Out in the courtyard were 2 small gnomes. They were watering plants and tending to a garden. They wore stumpy, pointy hats and tiny little coats. The two gnomes looked to be two females and were identical in looks. They both had long black hair draping down from their hats. Sunflower quietly knocked on the glass. The two gnomes noticed and walked up to the glass. Sunflower made a fist and tapped it 2 times into the palm of her other hand. The gnomes nodded and worked together to get the door open. Sunflower pulled me through the doorway and into the courtyard. "This is Eve and Leah," Sunflower quietly introduced me. "They're Eric's sisters. They're twin gnomes."
Is he here?"
Eve and Leah asked in unison. "Yes, and I'm pretty sure he's looking for me by this point," Sunflower worried. She anxiously bit down onto the fingers of her left hand as she watched the window panes. "Take the door!" The gnomes pointed to another doorway in the courtyard. Sunflower and I went through it, and it led out into a hallway on the other side of the building. Neither of us heard footsteps by this point. Sunflower led me over to another side door that went outside. "I think we're in the clear." She opened the door and stepped outside. Sunflower looked both ways and stepped out further. We ended up walking outside alongside the building. We felt safe and more calm. "I'm sorry our library visit was cut short," Sunflower said. She kept sadly looking down at her feet. "It's okay," I assured her. "It was nice getting to spend some time like that with you." "Really?" She looked up at me. You really think..." Sunflower's eyes started closing, and her speech slurred. Her face went red as she began to faint. She dropped onto my shoulder, but I caught her in time. I bent my knees to cushion her fall as I got a better grasp of her falling body. I looked up for my eyes to meet with a glowing, menacing look from Jonathan. "What did you do to her?" I yelled at him. I felt Sunflower sweat profusely.
"I raised her fever to that of 102 degrees. Nearly lethal, and rising," Jonathan said.
His cold, gritty words hit me like a whole building was dropped on my head as I realized he was killing Sunflower. "Stop it! She didn't do anything!" I yelled back. "Leave her alone!"
"I gave her plenty of chances to work for me,"
Jonathan said. He didn't move a muscle. Sunflower looked up at me. She was weak. Her face was a bright red and covered in sweat. "Don't let him take me," she struggled to speak. "I'd rather die." "No, I won't let you die." I held Sunflower tightly in my arms. I began to shed tears. A strong shiver bolted down my spine as I felt Jonathan get closer.
"Give her to me, and I'll consider sparing you to more luxurious chains,"
he said in his rough voice. The gravel in his speech fueled my fear for this monster. All I could think about doing was holding Sunflower close to me. I wanted her to feel the touch of another human as she died. Her eyes lost focus. She began to fade.
"Give her to me,"
Jonathan demanded again, this time with an angrier tone than the previously calm way he implored. I considered hitting him, shouting at him again. I didn't know what to do. Maybe I could find something to hit him with, but there was nothing on the ground but the cracked asphalt of an old basketball court and pieces of mulch scattered around the ground. I let out a sob before I heard a swoosh through the air and saw something stab the ground around me. I looked up. Jonathan looked around, confused. I did the same. Another object stabbed the ground in a similar spot. I could only see the back of an arrow suddenly jutting out from the asphalt. The sun shined behind a standing shadow on the top of the building beside us. The figure jumped down and slid alongside the wall of the building. A slender, cloaked figure walked up and drew another arrow into their bow. He looked up and took better aim at Jonathan. "Back off, you ugly hog," the figure threatened. "I will throw an arrow right through you. It will be easy." The figure lifted his head a bit more to meet his eyes with Jonathan's. He had light blonde hair and some scars on his face.
"You bothersome little crook."
Jonathan drew out a large chain with a large metal knife attached to the end of it. Sunflower began to recover from the forced fever. She gasped for air and held on to me as she breathed heavily. She buried her face in my chest and wiped her sweat off onto my shirt. It was really gross, but the least of my worries. Jonathan and the mystery figure began to fight. The archer threw a couple of arrows at Jonathan, only for him to deflect them with his chain.
"My chains are of hardened steel, Lenny."
Jonathan revealed the archer's name. "But as your flesh," Lenny snapped back with a smirk. His hood was nearly about to fall fully from his head. There was more back and forth between the two. Jonathan had Lenny backed up against the wall of the building. Lenny jumped up the wall and pushed himself off and over Jonathan, kicking him on the head as he passed him. He was clearly swift and agile. He knew what he was doing and what he was up against. It was like he's done this dance before.
You think you're going to accomplish something?
Jonathan launched his chain at Lenny. He dodged it before it reached a centimeter in proximity to his body. Jonathan continued,
All you do is prove yourself to be an annoyance.
If I can't kill you, then I'm better off staying one, Lenny remarked. He launched more arrows at Jonathan and managed to nick a part of his cloak, pinning him down. Jonathan struggled to free his cloak from the arrow. The beast snarled. I sensed that Sunflower was strong enough to stand up as she was moving her legs around to get in a better position to try and move. I helped her up and kept her leaning against me. Her knees wobbled, but she found a better balance. I carried her to a small blue play structure. It consisted of a few rings stacked on top of each other. It was some sort of cylindrical jungle gym. I helped Sunflower into it and hid myself with her inside of it. The rings were thick and did good in hiding us from immediate view. Who is that? I whispered to Sunflower. Lenny, she answered. He's kind of a known criminal around here, and he steals from Eric all the time. But he hates Jonathan and has been trying to take him down for a while. Eric lets him get away with his stolen goods in hopes he'll actually take him down. That bow and arrow definitely came from Eric's shop. Eric sells weaponry? I asked, surprised. Yes, and for occasions like this one. He prepared himself to fend off against a direct attack from Jonathan, but he lets Lenny do most of the work instead, Sunflower explained. Some parts of what she told me didn't make sense. If Jonathan was such a big threat around here, why wouldn't Eric supply weapons to everyone in the area? Why hasn't anyone stood up to this beast before? I feared that this Jonathan was just too powerful for everyone to really take down, maybe even together at once. Lenny seemed to barely find a way to send a scratch onto Jonathan's body. Just give up! Lenny pointed one more arrow, aimed at Jonathan's face, still hidden within the shadow his cloak threw over him.
You're not even worth trying to fight. Jonathan let out a devious chuckle. Why do I waste my time with you?
He walked away and went back towards his facility. You leave her alone, and I'll consider sparing your precious time. Lenny scolded him, but Jonathan didn't answer. He wrapped his chain and hid it within his cloak. Is it safe? I asked Sunflower, watching Jonathan walk away. I think so. Sunflower stood up. She clearly felt relieved, yet I could tell she was still anxious. She'd be in a lot of trouble if she were to be found alone with Jonathan. I would be too. We'd both be done for. Once Jonathan was out of sight, Sunflower climbed out from the blue play structure and caught up with Lenny before he left. Lenny! She waved him down. Thank you. Lenny just looked at her. I ran up to the two of them. Lenny looked at me and nodded and looked back at Sunflower. Someday he'll get what's coming to him, Lenny said. He sped off and ran up the wall of the building. Once he got up onto the roof, he looked back and waved to me and Sunflower. So now what? I wondered. We play it gently. We stay cautious. And we don't get in Jonathan's way again, Sunflower answered. Wait, but he got in our way, I told her. He sure doesn't think that way. Sunflower looked down. She was fidgeting with her dress. I think I just want to go home for the rest of the day, Sunflower said. End of chapter 4.